Okay, you're on.
Hi, this is Heather Lester. I'm a landlord-tenant mediator with Utah Community.
I cannot hear you.
And
Okay, go ahead now.
hi, this is Heather Lester. I'm a landlord-tenant mediator with Utah Community Action, and I am talking to you today about a tenant toolkit. And we are talking specifically in this video about tenant rights, and we're going to go over the eviction process. As you can assume, there's a lot to go through with the eviction process. So I'll try to make it as minimal and as easy to understand as possible. The main thing, there's several different ways you can end a lease. The landlord obviously can evict. There's usually, the renters give notice within their lease parameters. Sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 60 days to end the lease on their terms, whether it be the end of the lease, an early termination, whatever that looks like. The main thing is if all the items are abided by within the lease, then a tenancy can mutually end. In the instance that something happens to where it's not mutual and there is an issue with when the landlord chooses or can or has the ability to give you a notice that will start the eviction process. So there's many reasons why evictions happen. Obviously, illegal activities, non-payment of rent, violation of other terms within the lease. So there's varying reasons why evictions happen. The 5 main evictions in Utah, which we'll discuss, and again, this is very brief. You're going to definitely want to look at this toolkit and understand more in depth of each particular type. Sometimes the different types of evictions can go together, different notice periods. So the main thing is in Utah, a landlord must provide a written notice before beginning the eviction process. So there are 2, and it is tricky, actually. Sometimes when people call for mediation services or for even just case management intervention with some places that will help with rental assistance, like Utah Community Action, sometimes it's hard to determine which part you're in, because initially there is the notice that's giving you a notice for eviction. And then there's also, after that expires, which we'll go into, the summons and the complaint, which actually is served upon you when you have an eviction notice filed against you with the court. So they're going to go through with the legal eviction process. So anyway, aside from the information I give you, I want to hurry and put a pin in a Utah Housing Coalition did some other videos with the Utah Self-Help Center and also the Utah Legal Services. Those videos are also available on this YouTube channel with Utah Housing Coalition. So aside from this information, the toolkit itself, review those other videos just to help make sure you understand the eviction process. So going forward, again, there's 5 different types of evictions in the state of Utah. There is the 3-day notice to pay or vacate, the 3-day notice to comply or vacate, the 3-day notice to vacate, I have to keep looking, obviously, the 5-day notice to terminate a tenant at will. We'll explain what that is. And then the 15-day notice to vacate. So that's like an end of lease termination. Okay. So we'll talk about all of those things, all of those different types of eviction notices. So we'll start at the bottom. We'll go with the 15-day notice. So the way that the law is written is it's 15 days, 15 consecutive days that a lease can be terminated, basically like a no cause terminate. This happens a lot of the time when maybe a landlord is selling a property, selling a house, anything like that. So they have to give the 15 days as basically the 15 days legally in order to end the lease. In my experience, what I usually find, it's always up to at least a month. A lot of landlords are pretty lenient with the fact that they're giving at least a month's notice from the last time they gathered the rent. So in the instance, though, that they wanted to just go on the legal aspect, 15 days would be consecutive, how they could end the lease. Okay. And moving on to the next one, which is 5-day. 5-day notice is like a tenant at will. This happens a lot with month-to-month leases. This does happen a lot with specifically somebody that doesn't have a lease in play at all. So maybe they're exchanging rent for housework or rent for yard work. Sometimes it's people that are renting out basements or bedrooms. It's a way to end a rental relationship that doesn't have a lot of parameters set around it. Sometimes when people do buy foreclosed properties, or they do purchase a new home and there may be someone living there that they're not aware of, they can do these types of leases to make sure that there's not a tenancy in that unit. So you'll see this happen quite frequently with that. Again, that's the 5-day. Moving on to the 3-day. There are three 3-day notices. The 3-day notice to, let me get it. The 3-day notice to Complier vacate and the 3-day notice to vacate are generally nuisances. I want to always express, and especially when I teach this live, I always want to express the difference between the two. So in the instance that there's a crime committed or there's something that happens on the property that's a violation of the lease, that, specifically some examples I give is if there's criminal activity, potentially drugs, running a business. Sometimes there has been a lot of things. I won't give specific examples on here, but as far as something that's an illegal activity, that's a definite violation of the lease, that is a notice, 3-day notice to terminate or 3-day notice to vacate. That doesn't give the comply option. It just basically ends the lease because of a violation, criminal activity or otherwise. In the tenant toolkit, it does actually give quite a few examples. To go on the back side of that, the 3-day complier vacate, that's similar, but at the same time, it actually is something minor. So let's just say I like to give the example when I'm doing my classes that I'm doing my laundry at 3 in the morning and it doesn't make my neighbor very happy. So it's something that I can fix. It's something that can be remedied, something that maybe we can have a discussion about that can stop, those types of things. So that's a complier vacate versus just the notice to vacate. I hope that explains kind of the difference between the two. Again, there's more information in the toolkit. So the last one that we talk about, which is generally the most conversational and it happens most frequently, is the pay or vacate. So it's a 3-day pay or vacate. In the state of Utah, the law just changed. So all of these, the 3-day, the 5-day, the 15-day, all of these were all of them were calendar days, which basically means Saturday and Sundays included. So the only one that has changed is the pay or vacate. So the nuisances, the 5-day, the 15-day, those are still calendar days. And the 3-day pay or vacate for money exchange, delinquency of rent, is now business days. So Saturday and Sunday don't count. For example, if you receive a notice on Thursday, you have 3 business days. So that would be Friday, Monday, Tuesday, and that would be the end of the notice period for you to comply or pay. Okay? So understanding pay or vacate, it's generally speaking, there's a delinquency in rent by the time you receive your first notice, which does not have to be served to you through a process server. Generally, it's either given to you, put on a door in an obvious, conspicuous place. That will outline the arrearage, that will outline the service process fee, and potentially any late fees. That gives you that time frame, those 3-day business days on this one to comply. That's how that works. When you go through the eviction process, at any point when you receive the first notice, which is like the first, this is the first notice, I guess, for lack of a better word, the first notice that you're going to get that this is happening. So if there's a comply option, what do? Just like the previous video, we communicate. We try to get something written down. We try to get conversations documented. We try to get money in place. We try to figure out whatever we can possibly do to not have this eviction go to the next level. So avoiding eviction, obviously, main thing we talked about again last video, it's hard and it's difficult and life does happen, but make sure you do everything within reason to try and get your rent paid. Again, there's a lot more tenant rights that do activate and are easier to assist you in case there's an issue if your rent is current. Okay. So number one, because it's such a short period of time, 3 business days, 3 calendar days, whatever it is, the main thing is you need to make sure you reach out and contact your landlord immediately. Again, 3 days is nothing to mess around with. I do like to always use the analogy, I've used it for years. The first day, even if you knew it was coming, generally speaking, is a shock day. The shock will hopefully entice and try to hopefully avoid panic, especially right now in the way that times are. First day is generally shock day. Second day, you're getting everything lined up. You're calling people, you're trying to round up things, you're trying to make sure you have that communication, that documentation. That's the second day. So we got shock day, we have business day, and then the third day is sometimes when you haven't got all of these other things in line. Again, even if you knew it was coming, the third day is really detrimental because that's when a lot of folks give up. So understanding that you have to keep pushing, keep getting that communication, keep trying at the end of these notice periods, 3, 5, 15, whatever they are, try to keep getting things moving along and avoid that the third day slump. Okay. So there's always 2-on-1, and I do recommend that a lot. Landlord tenant mediation obviously does try to get involved in a great majority of these before they're filed with the court. And also, once they're filed with the court, there's other options that come into play with basically volunteer attorneys as well. So there's all of these options that do help, but catching it as far upstream as you can is vital to avoiding eviction costs and avoiding eviction filings. So it says it in the book, and I'm actually right out around page 17 and 18 in the book in case you have that with you or you're looking at it. The main thing is there are legal consequences. So the notice periods that I talked about, again, the 3, the 5, the 15, whatever notice you've received, at that end of the notice period, crucial, it's absolutely vital to understand that at the end of that notice period, you go into another term, which is called unlawful detainer. And basically, it's just like it sounds. Unlawful detainer is what means you're detaining the property illegally because you haven't either vacated because of the nuisance or you have a delinquency in rent or whatever. So going into that unlawful detainer period can give legal consequences. This is where there's no more options to require that they take this money. They don't have to. It's generally sent to an attorney's office or it's generally sent to the court or both at that point. So again, the monies that were incurred, we'll just talk specifically pay or vacate. The monies that were incurred at that time, then now they're obviously higher because you're going to have filing fees, you're going to have attorney's costs, you potentially could have treble damages. We could definitely go into what those definitions are for those things as well. But for lack of a better time management situation, definitely this information's in the toolkit. But understanding unlawful detainer is what happens next after you've received this first notice. That's when you will get, if it goes to court and it's filed, you will get a process server. You will get this served legally by someone to say that it's a complaint and it's a summons now. Again, there's nothing I can stress more than making sure that if you get a summons and you have or have not vacated the property, to make sure you respond to that with the court, because in the instance that you have potential to make a payment arrangement, or in the instance that you can potentially stay, or just to avoid some sort of a legal judgment against you, that notice period, any notice period, is vital to communicate with the landlord, communicate with the attorney, and do a response to the court just to protect your rights so you have the ability to negotiate. And again, as a mediator or even as pro bono counsel, volunteer attorney representation, it makes the job easier. It makes it helpful to you if these responses are done and you make sure you pay attention to those timeframes. There's always the question, is there legal consequences if I stay? Is there legal consequences if I don't vacate? Yes, there are. Legal consequences come with the further amount of days that the apartment or unit is occupied. There has to be something in place for that. Again, avoiding judgments, trying to mediate or trying to remedy before it goes to court or before there's a court filing is always in your best interest, the attorney, the landlord, everybody's best interest to try and remedy this upstream. And if you talk to me further after this, you will definitely see I'm going to say upstream a lot. I'm going to say remedy. I'm going to say avoid judgments all the time. So just know that ahead of time. The time period again is very short. Again, 3 days. The notice to respond to the court summons is also 3 business days. So making sure that you know when that time period starts. From the day you're served, it starts the next day. For example, if you're served with a notice on a Monday, the notice period for 3 days starts Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. By the close of business on Thursday, a response is needed to the court. I do this all the time, but there's more of authority than I. So again, I'll refer you to Marcus Deegan. He has a video on the Utah Housing Coalition's YouTube channel. He explains it very well. And then there's the Self-Help Center. There's another video by Nathaniel Player, and he also explains it very well. And he provides resources to find out how to do them. You do not have to go and have Law School 101 to do an answer. There's many different ways, a lot of different templates out there. But the key is to get something filed should you choose to go that route. The UT Courts Self-Help website is also in the toolkit. There's several different references to it in here. Again, on page 19, there's the website. You can text them, you can call them. It's very user-friendly. I do like the website specifically because it does give you the templates and gives you an idea of how to visualize how to help yourself in this process, even if you don't have representation from the beginning. Last thing, as far as tenant rights go, on page 20, there's a flow chart. You can actually find it on the UT Courts website as well. It gives you a visual of how to look at the whole process of an eviction in Utah. So that's pretty helpful as well. The last question that we get asked a lot is on page 19. How will the eviction lawsuit affect you? It is, I hate to use the word detrimental, but it is a serious situation. It's not like, hey, I didn't pay my hospital bill. They'll probably, catch up with me in a couple of years. It is hard to obtain housing. It is hard to obtain affordable housing. And to help remedy your situation with an eviction, it is hard to overcome, but it's not impossible. I've seen impossible things happen on a daily basis. So the main thing I like to stress is if you can possibly avoid an eviction filing, it's in your best interest because it won't follow you. It won't have impacts on potentially what type of unit or what area the unit you want to rent is. It happens. It's not the end of the world if it does, but knowing your rights and understanding how you can overcome and get through, potentially with payment arrangements and understanding the debt as it goes. So definitely look into this toolkit, look into any resources you have. Again, mediation is a great resource to try and help to determine that communication if you're having difficulties with communication. But looking through the toolkit and understanding what exactly the eviction process entails and how you can prevent and help yourself through it will be absolutely vital to you. Again, if you have any questions, I'm always available. Again, Utah Community Action Landlord Tenant Program is one resource. That's where I'm at. And then also Utah Housing Coalition and many others. 2-in-1 is a great resource for that. But please reach out if you have questions and you need some help with this process.